Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. I have to be honest, I didn't put in my earplugs to have the last presentation translated because I wanted to listen to it in Lithuanian because I think it's a really interesting and beautiful language. But looking at the slides, I think I should go back and then afterwards look at the translation. All right. Moving on, I brought a short presentation for you all. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we at Uber imagine the future of mobility. And I think it will come to no surprise to most of you in this room when I say that we think the future of mobility is going to be electrified, it's going to be shared, and it's going to be autonomous. And for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we at Uber envision how this will play out. First of all, a couple of remarks about the company itself. So we're the biggest mobility platform in the world. We operate across 70 countries. We cover roughly 10,000 cities across the globe. And wherever we operate, our aim is really to provide the best mobility mix with the mobility modalities, the mobility options available on the ground wherever we operate, right? So here in Lithuania, this means mainly taxis and or PHVs. In some markets close by, it can also mean micromobility, it can mean transit. In other parts of the world, this also means, high-capacity vehicles, motos, tuk-tuks, whatever is available. We want to make sure that we have it on the platform to make sure our consumers, our customers, get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. A couple of metrics. When I say the largest mobility platform in the world, what does that actually translate to? So those are the numbers from Q2 2024, where we had gross bookings of around $40 billion US. We intermediated, on average, 30 million trips per day, right? So 30 million times per day, someone wants to get from point A to point B, and we help them find either a fleet partner or a driver to get them where they need to be. We had around 7.5 million earners, so couriers and drivers, active on the platform. And I mentioned those metrics just to show, to visualize a little bit the size and the scale of the platform, because when you look at those numbers, it's easy to imagine what could happen if we manage to shift only a small fraction already of that supply, of those trips, to, for example, use more electric vehicles to get those trips done, right? So the impact would be massive, which is why we are focusing very much on that. Short remark, when I say trips, oftentimes our mind automatically goes to car trips, right? Trips in a taxi, trips in a PHV. Oftentimes that doesn't necessarily need to be the case, right? In a lot of markets across the globe, we have products live, again, with micromobility, with transit. I'll touch upon that a little bit later. And the goal, of course, is that in the future, when we say trips, it will look something like this, right? You are at point A, you tell the algo you want to get to point B, and the algo composes for you a mix of mobility options that make the most sense for you and your trip, i.e. that can be take a micromobility option to the closest transit station, get off at station XYZ, and there you jump into your pooled trip, which will take you to your end destination. We've already heard it in a couple of presentations this morning earlier. We still have a lot to do when we look at the mobility sector specifically, and we look at the numbers of the CO2 emissions since the 1990s to today. The picture doesn't look great, to be honest, right? We had a growth of roughly 72%. Now, also to be honest, there have been a lot of efforts put into this area over the last couple of years, and we actually see them pay off. But we don't see them pay off as much as we'd like to in the transport sector as of now. We see them pay off big time in the power industry, industrial combustion and processes, and so on. When we compare the 2021 to 2022 numbers in the mobility sector, we still see there is a lot to be done. And we obviously want to take part in that as well. We want to pay our fair share there. So we set ourselves as a company very ambitious goals. By 2025, we want to have the first two cities, London and Amsterdam, at emission-free level. By 2030, we want to get to zero emissions in the US, Canada, and in Europe. And by 2040, we want to achieve that goal globally, right? So those are very, very ambitious goals, especially because not everything is in our hands as a mobility platform. And short remark in brackets, I'm obviously focusing my remarks today here on the mobility sector. We also have a big business unit in food delivery, Uber Eats, where we're also investing a lot of effort into making sure that earners transition towards electrified mobility, where we build up partnerships with partners who can help restaurants with sustainable packaging and so on. So on mobility, what does that mean for us at Uber? If you boil it down, we have set ourselves those ambitious goals that I just mentioned, and we want to implement them with basically three measures, right? First of all, we want to make sure that earners, i.e. drivers, couriers, or fleet partners employing those folks, can actually get to providing their services in an electrified manner. That means we need to partner with OEMs. We need to make sure that car producers, car importers actually have the vehicles available for those earners. We need to make sure that those vehicles are available at a reasonable price, right? So we are investing a lot in those negotiations with them. Charging infrastructure is a very important point. When you survey or when you talk to earners, you often hear that charging is one of the biggest hurdles for them to actually transition to a fully EV vehicle. They are, in some cases, actually rightfully worried that, for example, when they need it, a charging spot might not be nearby. What do they do if a customer gets in their car, wants to be taken to their destination, and they don't have enough battery power left? Will they spend too much time charging their vehicle and not be on the road earning money? So all of those points are very, very valid, and we believe it's our role as a platform to make sure, first of all, we educate them, and second of all, that we make the reasonable options available to them also with regards to charging infrastructure. Second, we want to make sure that the folks providing their services in an electrified manner have the demand, so we also have to educate our consumers. We want to make sure that they are aware that we have Uber Green, Comfort Electric, all of those fully electric products available on the platform, and that they actually use it. Those options are most of the time at the same price as the regular trip, but of course with a lot less CO2 emissions. And finally, we ourselves also want to be transparent. I just talked about the goals that we set ourselves. Those are public, and we will be held accountable to those. I want to insert a couple of remarks on transit. First of all, because it ties in closely to our efforts on sustainability, and second of all, because in Europe, you cannot really talk about mobility without talking about public transportation, right? Public transit is and will be for the foreseeable future the backbone of the mobility in our neck of the woods. So this is why we as Uber have invested a lot in partnerships with public transit agencies. In Europe, for example, in many cities, when you open up the app, it not only tells you how much a trip in a taxi or a P or micromobility is, but it also tells you, for example, where the nearest bus station is, what number of bus you need to get on, when it leaves, and what the ticket costs will be. In some markets, like Paris or London, we have partnerships with the transit agencies, where you can book your ticket for public transit directly in the Uber app. So this is something that we're very keen on fostering and leveraging even more. And it sort of came organically to us because, to be honest, consumers use the Uber platform organically in a complementary manner to public transit. This is quite an old graph, to be honest. It shows you London. The white dots are tube stations. The blue lines are trips to and from those tube stations. When we searched for that data, we saw that consumers use our platform as a first mile, last mile service pretty organically without us doing anything to foster that, right? So they're not using the platform necessarily to substitute for a transit trip, but they use it to make the transit trip more accessible to them. So when we saw that, we of course thought, first of all, again, we need to partner with transit agencies. And second of all, we should build out specific products that make it even easier for consumers to use our platform in such a complementary way to public transit. I'm just going to show you one short example in one of my markets. This is right outside of Munich, where we built a first mile, last mile product specifically for users of the S-Bahn. So if you travel outside of Munich, I know some folks here can probably attest to that, the public transit access gets a little bit thinned out, right? So it's not as easy if you live there for you to access an S-Bahn, the train that runs there. So what we did is we defined perimeters around those S-Bahn stations for users to get to a fixed price. So basically today, if you live 2, 3, 4 kilometers away from one of those stations, you can just book your trip in the Uber app at a fixed price. It's very reliable, and it's therefore very, very popular. We have had roughly 50,000 trips like that last year. And you can fairly assume that those 50,000 trips would have otherwise been taken in the privately owned vehicle by those individuals because they just live too far away from the station. That also allowed us to grow our services outside the metropolitan areas, right? This is another example, Berlin, where you see how we grew organically in the agglomeration and in the suburbs. And the graphs on the right show you, once again, how the platform is being used complementary to public transit. When is the Uber platform the most popular? During the weekends and during the nighttime, i.e. when public transit either isn't running or the schedule is very much thinned out. So that was on electrification and on public transit. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about shared, i.e. pooled trips. We have had pooling on the platform for a very long time. In the past, it was mainly in the big cities, like the very, very dense cities where we had a lot of demand, so it was easy to pool it. Because basically what a pooling product does is you select it on your product selector, and then the algo checks, are there at a similar starting point, at a similar point of time, people wanting to go to a similar end destination. And if so, the algo combines those trips to one trip. And of course, it's a win-win-win situation, right? The rider pays only a fraction of the price because he shares the price with the other rider. The driver makes more money because at all point in time, he has multiple paying customers in his car. And it's also a win for the community because instead of 2, 3, 4, 5 trips, 5 cars on the roads, there's only 1 car on the road. Obviously, Corona sort of put a stop to those efforts. And we have since sort of picked up again, right? When in the past, we were focused very much on the bigger cities and on increasing efficiency in the bigger cities. Nowadays, we're also rolling out those products in smaller markets. For example, I live in Zurich, which is a great city, by the way. Go there if you haven't been, but it's not the biggest city. It's not what you would call a metropolitan area, right? It's not the densest place in the world, but still, we are now able to deploy our pooling products even in markets like that. So we're very, very excited for that because we truly believe that those sorts of products are a real, substantial, and valid use case that will take us into the future. Then finally, a couple of remarks on autonomous mobility. We've already heard a lot about it yesterday and today. I'm not going to deep dive into all the benefits of autonomous mobility here. Just like for me personally, one of the biggest upsides of autonomous mobility is the safety aspect of it all. If you look at the stats of today, 90% of all incidents on the road are caused by human error, right? It's oversight. People are driving inebriated, people are driving too tired, they're distracted by their cell phone. All of those factors can be completely eliminated with autonomous technology. We at Uber used to have our own autonomous technology group, ATG, where we did our own research in that field. At Corona, again, we sort of parted ways there and focused on our core mission of being the #1 platform and sold our ATG group to a company called Aurora, which is a publicly traded AV technology company in the US, and we have switched from developing the technology ourselves to becoming a partner to everyone who basically develops and deploys that technology. So nowadays, we have a lot of partnerships across the world. We partner with Cruise, with Waymo, with WeRide, with Carken on Uber Eats, where we have the delivery robots. And we are scaling those out pretty quickly. It really depends on the market that you look at. We have a lot of partnerships already in the US. Not that much as of now in Europe, but I'm sure this will come sooner or later. And I think that is probably the right approach, because for the foreseeable future, we believe that the mobility sector will remain hybrid with regards to autonomous technology, right? You will, for the foreseeable future, not have AV technology that will be able to take people from point A to point B during a snowy night when it's foggy in the old town city center of Vilnius, for example. You will need a human driver to do that for the foreseeable future. You will need a human driver to bring the elderly couple to the airport to help them with their heavy luggage getting in and out of the car. So those two worlds will exist in parallel for the foreseeable future, and I think that's a good thing, actually, because when I started at Uber, which was 7 years ago, like the narrative was that AV technology is right around the corner, right? At the drop of a hat, every car on the street will be switched, and it will only be AV vehicles. I think today, the narrative is a lot more adult and a lot more reasonable, which I think is a good thing, because it helps us really focus on deploying the technology where it can provide the most benefit. It allows us as a society, and it also allows the regulators to get accustomed with the technology, and that will mean that it will be in the mid to long term the most scalable. So this is how we believe we will get to a future of mobility which is electrified, shared, and autonomous. Thank you very much.